Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 on Wednesday the 12th of July. My name is Brian Liddy and I'm here with another review of today's news for you. Sadly, we don't have any guests for you this evening. We've found out with the summer holidays that it's hard. It's not easy to get hold of guests at the moment, but anyway, we'll crack on with today's news and starting with Ukraine update day 504. Members of the G7 have signed a joint declaration outlining the long-term security and economic support they plan to provide Ukraine as a result of the Russian invasion, as well as support to facilitate a reform agenda that will provide Ukraine with the good governance necessary to advance towards its Euro-Atlantic aspirations. The security pledge within a G7 framework are meant to be part of a long-term strategy to support Kyiv, according to German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Jens Stoltenberg said that Ukraine is now closer to NATO than ever before, as he outlined a three-part multi-year package. The plan will establish a new NATO-Ukraine Council, reaffirming that Ukraine will become a member of NATO and removing the requirement for the membership action plans. NATO's plans on Ukraine membership prompted President Volodymyr Zelensky to say he has faith but not confidence in the alliance's decisions. Before NATO published a communique, the Ukrainian leader said it would be absurd if Ukraine was not offered NATO membership. The US National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, has told CNN that Ukraine joining NATO now would mean war with Russia, during a media round where he expressed support for the alliance's caution. UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace suggested Ukraine needed to put more emphasis on saying thank you for Western help. Mr. Wallace is reported to have said, "You know, we're not Amazon." Mr. Wallace said that he told them that last year he drove 11 hours and was given a list. Ukrainian Defence Minister Alexei Reznikov has hailed a bilateral agreement signed between Ukraine and Sweden on cooperation in defence procurement as more good news from Vilnius, following his earlier announcement of an agreement on the exchange and mutual protection of classified information between the two countries. Zelensky had used his social media channels to outline his priorities for the second day of the NATO summit in Vilnius. He also thanked Germany for agreeing to send more Patriot launchers and missiles to Ukraine after speaking with Chancellor Olaf Scholz at the summit. At the end of the NATO summit in Vilnius, President Biden is expected to say, "We're at a high point of Allied unity coming out of the summit and how we've rallied the world to support the people of Ukraine." A White House official said Biden will stress that it's important to build on the unity to tackle other important challenges, such as climate change, emerging technologies, and threats to the rule-based international order. This morning, Ukraine's armed forces said they had made some progress near Bakhmut in the fighting in the Donetsk region and also claimed to have shot down 11 drones overnight. Russia launched a wave of kamikaze drone attacks on Kyiv and its region for a second night in a row, Ukraine's military said on today. Roman Abramovich is challenging European Union sanctions imposed on him after the start of the war in Ukraine, arguing the restrictions were imposed simply because he is a well-known Russian. So that's the Ukraine update for today, and we have some breaking news for our first item. Hugh Edwards has been named by his wife, Vicky Flynn, as the BBC presenter facing allegations over payments for sexually explicit images. In a statement to the PA news agency, Flynn said her husband was suffering from serious mental health issues and is receiving inpatient hospital care where he will stay for the foreseeable future, as she asked for privacy for her family. Flynn said, "In the light of recent reporting regarding the BBC presenter, I am making this statement on behalf of my husband, Hugh Edwards, after what have been 5 extremely difficult days for our family. I am doing this primarily out of concern for his mental well-being and to protect our children. Hugh is suffering from serious mental health issues. As is well documented, he has been treated for severe depression in recent years. The events of the last few days have greatly worsened matters. He has suffered another serious episode and is now receiving inpatient hospital care where he'll stay for the foreseeable future. Once well enough to do so, he intends to respond to the stories that have been published. To be clear, Hugh was first told that there were allegations being made against him last Thursday. In the circumstances and given Hugh's condition, I would like to ask that the privacy of my family and everyone else caught up in these upsetting events is respected. I know that Hugh is deeply sorry that so many colleagues have been impacted by the recent media speculation. We hope this statement will bring that to an end. So moving on to our next item. The Chief Executive of the HS2 Railway has resigned amid severe delays and soaring costs that have seen the project scaled back. Mark Thurston announced on Wednesday he would be departing the government-owned company at the end of September after 6.5 years at the helm, making him the firm's longest-serving chief executive. The HS2 chair, Sir John Thompson, will take over as executive chair for an interim period while a new chief executive is recruited. The scheme, which the government pledged would drive investment and economic growth in the north, has been delayed repeatedly to between 2029 and 2033 due to spiralling costs and construction difficulties. Thurston's resignation comes as major work is taking place at more than 350 sites, and the first phase of the project between London and Birmingham is at peak construction. It follows a bruising report from the Public Accounts Committee, PAC, last week that urged the Department for Transport to finally establish its expectations for HS2's London Euston terminus. MPs said that the government does not know what it is trying to achieve with the station after its construction was paused, along with other parts of HS2, in March by the Transport Secretary Mark Harper. HS2 trains are now not expected to run into Euston until 2041 at the earliest, after initially being scheduled for 2026. The DFT has been under severe pressure to find cost savings on the project, as soaring inflation means the cost of raw materials has increased significantly. Part of the line between Birmingham, Crewe and Manchester was delayed by 2 years in the spring, meaning the line to Crewe may not be open until 2036, and it will not reach Manchester until 2043. The eastern section between the Midlands and Leeds was scrapped in 2021. Almost 1 million UK homeowners will be forced to shell out at least £500 more a month to cover mortgage payments by the end of 2026, as borrowers suffer the consequences of rising interest rates, the Bank of England has warned. Forecasts released on Wednesday showed that of the 4 million homeowners expected to roll onto new mortgage contracts over the next 3 years, the majority will be paying up to £220 more a month to cover the mortgage by the end of this year because of the difficulty of finding contracts with comparable rates. The payments of more than 1 million borrowers are likely to rise by more than twice that amount by the end of 2026. Markets are increasingly betting that policymakers at the Bank of England raise interest rates beyond the current rate of 5% to a peak of 6.25% in early 2024 in order to combat stubbornly high inflation. The average 2-year fixed mortgage rate rose to 6.7% on Wednesday, the highest level since the middle of the financial crisis in August 2008, according to data from Moneyfacts. However, Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey said higher payments were part of the wider economic trade-off of trying to tame price growth. It is going to have an impact, clearly, he said. The Bank of England's Financial Stability Report also showed that the proportion of households under pressure because of rising mortgage payments had risen from 1.6% in November 2022 to about 2%. The figure is likely to reach 2.3% by the end of the year, affecting about 650,000 households. Michael Gove's department is handing back £1.9 billion to the Treasury, originally meant to tackle England's housing crisis after struggling to find projects to spend it on. The Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, the DLUHC, has surrendered hundreds of millions of pounds budgeted for 2022-23, including £255 million meant to fund new affordable housing and £245 million meant to improve building safety. Officials said the department was unable to spend the money, which accounts for about a third of its entire housing budget, thanks to rising interest rates and uncertainty in the housing market after the COVID-19 pandemic. Michael Gove has also dropped a mandatory target for councils to build 300,000 new homes a year, but experts warn the lack of investment is likely to exacerbate the housing crisis in England, where home buying is forecast to drop to its lowest level since the Second World War. Jack Shaw, a local government expert who uncovered the figures through a Freedom of Information request, said the government is experiencing significant challenges investing in housing because of a perfect storm in market conditions. But the decision to delay housing investment or withdraw it altogether as a result of lower than anticipated spending will mean fewer homes are built. The SNP said there has been decades of Tory and Labour Party underinvestment in affordable and social housing across the UK, leading to millions of people facing increasingly unaffordable house prices and rents. Scotland has consistently outpaced the rest of the UK in building affordable homes. In the last financial year, Scotland built 10,458 affordable homes, an increase of 7%, that's 701 homes, on the 9,757 homes completed in 2021-22, which amounted to 13.9 homes built per 10,000 population in Scotland, compared with 8.0 in Wales, 9.7 in England, and 13.0% per 10,000 in Northern Ireland. The number of affordable homes built in Scotland in 2022 was the highest since the current statistical series began in 2000. Commenting, SNP housing spokesperson Chris Stevens MP said, the Tories and pro-Brexit Labour Party caused the UK housing crisis through decades of underinvestment, and now they're making it even worse. It beggars belief that Michael Gove is scrapping targets and surrendering vital house building funding when millions of people are facing increasingly unaffordable house prices and rents. Worse still, the Tories and Labour Party are causing long-term damage to the availability of affordable housing by imposing Brexit, which has fuelled UK inflation, increased house building costs, and caused staffing shortages and supply chain issues in the building trade. The Independent Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, is preparing to sound the alarm over the impact of rising interest rates on the public finances, delivering a serious blow to the government's scope for pre-election tax cuts. The OBR will warn that stubbornly high inflation and soaring borrowing costs are adding to the challenges facing Rishi Sunak, making it less likely that he will meet one of his 5 key pledges, that is, tackling the UK's public debt. It is understood the OBR will produce a range of scenarios in its annual Fiscal Risks and Sustainability report on Thursday, setting out the impact of higher interest rates for the public purse in a warning that sustained pressure could force it to tear up its official forecasts. The OBR said it would assess the fiscal implications of recent rises in global interest rates, consider the vulnerability of the UK's current debt position, and explore the challenges in getting debt to fall in the coming years. At the start of the year, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak centred 3 of his 5 priorities on the economy: halving inflation, growing the economy, and getting debt falling. However, leading economists have warned that failure on his top priority, to reduce inflation, was placing all 3 in danger, as the Bank of England's rapid rate rises increased the prospect of recession, and as higher inflation and borrowing costs add billions of pounds to the government's debt interest bill. The UK government's cost of borrowing on the international debt market has risen to the highest level since the 2008 financial crisis in recent weeks, surpassing the level during the turmoil of Liz Truss's premiership. In the budget in March, the OBR forecast Chancellor Jeremy Hunt would meet his self-imposed debt target to get debt falling as a percentage of GDP within 5 years' time, with headroom of £6.5 billion to spare, the smallest buffer set by any Chancellor since the watchdog's creation in 2010. However, it warned a 1% point rise in interest rates would add about £20 billion to borrowing in 2027-28, the key year for meeting this target, more than wiping out the Chancellor's headroom. It based its forecast on the Bank of England's base rate peaking at 4.3% and had closed its forecasting round when the yield or interest rate on 10-year UK government debt was 3.3%. Since then, the bank has increased rates to 5%, with financial markets anticipating further increases to a peak of 6.3% early next year. The yield on 10-year UK gilts has risen to 4.6%. The Home Office ordered the removal of child-friendly murals from the controversial Manston detention camp near Ramsgate, The Guardian has learned. The newspaper revealed last week that the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, had ordered the removal of colourful murals of cartoon characters such as Mickey Mouse and Baloo from Jungle Book painted on the walls at the Kent intake unit, where children, mainly those who are unaccompanied, are processed after arriving on small boats. Now it has emerged that the order to paint over child-friendly murals also extended to Manston, where at its busiest time of year, towards the end of last year, about 4,000 people were held, including many children, ranging from babies to teenagers. It is understood that the murals at both sites were painted over last Tuesday by the Ministry of Justice's Estates team. The child-friendly images at Manston were praised in an inspection report published last month by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons on conditions at Manston's KIU and other initial reception centres on the Kent coast, Western Jetfoil. Referencing the decorations, the HMIP prison states the family marquee was decorated in bright, cheerful colours. That praise was set against multiple concerns about the welfare of children raised in the report, which found that children were detained for far too long at all of the reception sites, with 232 children held for more than 96 hours, although the time limit is currently 24 hours. The longest a child was held was 19 days. In one case, a 17-year-old girl who had a 10-month-old baby she said was conceived through rape was held at KIU for almost 24 hours. It was initially reported that Robert Jenrick had said the murals had to be removed because they were too welcoming, but on Tuesday, Jenrick told MPs they were not age-appropriate for teenage migrants. However, the Home Office has admitted that unaccompanied children as young as 9 have arrived in the UK on small boats, and there is a family section at Manston that includes facilities for parents with babies and toddlers. At Prime Minister's questions today, SNP MP Pete Wishart called on the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, who was standing in for Rishi Sunak, to condemn the Home Office decision to paint over the Kent intake unit mural. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite so grotesque as the painting over of Mickey Mouse on a children's mural, as was done at the Home Office in a detention centre in Kent, Mr Wishart said. Excuse me. Sort of done it back off. Excuse me. No minister so far. I'm afraid I've lost my voice. Through something going down the wrong way. No minister, so far, has raised the necessary compassion or concern to speak out about this. So, can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister to look into the deeper recesses of his soul and just simply condemn it? The murals row has come at a time when refugee and children's charities have raised profound concerns about what they describe as non-concessions in the illegal migration bill that will allow that will allow unaccompanied children to be in detention centres when they arrive with no time limit. Forgive me about that coughing outburst. A group of SNP MSPs, including First Minister Hamza Yousaf, have written to First Bus urging them to reconsider the decision to cancel its weekend night service in Glasgow. The Greater Glasgow SNP MSPs, who have written to Managing Director of First Bus, Duncan Cameron, represents areas and constituents who will be impacted by the soon-to-be axed service. In their joint letter, they have said that the removal of this service Okay. I'm going to take a break to clear my throat and I'll be back in a moment. Excuse me.
How do you mean no more commission?
Well, no one in Scotland can commission an idea. You know, if I went to BBC Scotland and I said, oh, I've got this great idea for a sitcom, I've got this brilliant idea for a drama, you know, there isn't one person in Scotland that can okay it unless it goes through London.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Full Scottish. What's happening today?
Hello and welcome to the Full Scottish here on Broadcasting Scotland.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
That need, that desire for independence is ever stronger than perhaps it was in 2014. So there's an obligation that we've got to give leadership to that campaign. That's what Nicola Sturgeon, as our First Minister, has been doing.
My feeling about Boris Johnson is he can't be trusted on anything.
That is now and forever will be known as the rape clause.
I'm old enough to remember going into Europe in '73, and I remember how much of a razor's edge that was balanced on. And I think we made it by 53%, if I remember correctly, for going in. And ever since that time, England particularly has been pretty much schizophrenic, down the middle about whether it felt British or whether it felt European. And that schism, that crack has remained throughout English society ever since.
Scotland means business. Scotland's voice won't be stilled, it won't be silenced, it has to be heard.
About the work that's been done by Broadcasting Scotland in giving community activists, yes activists, Scottish activists a platform other than the traditional media outlets.
Forgive me. Forgive me. I'll go back to the start of that previous item. A group of SNP MSPs, including First Minister Humza Yousaf, have written to First Bus urging them to reconsider the decision to cancel its weekend night service in Glasgow. Greater Glasgow SNP MSPs who have written to Managing Director of First Bus, Duncan Cameron, represent areas and constituents who will be impacted by the soon-to-be axed service. Excuse me. In their joint letter, they have said the removal of this service will have a detrimental impact on many of their constituents and Glasgow's industries, specifically highlighting Glasgow's late-night workers, tourists, women and minority groups and the city's vibrant hospitality sector, including hotels, bars, clubs and entertainment venues. Commenting, SNP MSP Claire Hawhay said, "The decision to axe the weekend night first bus service in Glasgow is a devastating blow to so many people and businesses across Glasgow and the surrounding areas. Now more than ever, it is essential to have safe, reliable and affordable nighttime public transport, not only for workers in order to keep our nighttime economy alive in our hotels, bars, clubs and entertainment venues. We should be looking to increase public transport options for people and making it an easy, convenient choice to make. This flies in the face of what we should be trying to achieve. The response from the public, from businesses and from organisations speaks for itself, and I hope First Bus urgently review this decision so that the service can continue." The EU has narrowly passed a key law to protect nature, a core pillar of the Commission, President Ursula von der Leyen's European Green Deal. After months of fiery debate and an opposition campaign, scientists criticised as misleading. The Nature Restoration Law will place recovery measures on 20% of the EU's land and sea by 2030, rising to cover all degraded ecosystems by 2050. Lawmakers decided against killing the bill by only a dozen votes in Strasbourg on Wednesday, but watered it down on several points. They will send the proposal back to an Environment Committee before thrashing out details with Member States. "It's a huge social victory," says Albuena, a centre-left MEP from Spain in charge of the proposal, told reporters. "This is a law on behalf of nature. It's not a law against any person whatsoever." The landmark scientific assessment in 2019 found nature is dying faster than humans have ever known, driven by climate change, pollution, and the way people exploit the land and sea. The Restoration Law aims to reverse this trend and help the bloc hit biodiversity targets it has previously failed to meet. Opposition from the European People's Party, the EPP, nearly sank the proposal. Together with the right-wing European Conservatives and Reformists, the far-right Identity and Democracy Group and parts of the Market Liberal Renew Group, the EPP, argued the law would hurt food security and punish producers reeling from the pandemic and energy crisis. Scientists have rejected the claim that restoring nature is bad for food and the economy. An open letter signed by 6,000 scientists said opponents of the law not only lack scientific evidence, but even contradict it. They highlighted studies showing that restoring nature would improve food security, help fisheries, create jobs and save money. "We are systematically hearing misinformation," said Guy Pierre, a conservationist biologist at the Helmholtz Centre for Environmental Research, who was the author of the letter. "Lobby organisations can generate as much information as they want. But when policymakers are going against the science, we need to step in," he said. A recent study found the numbers of farmland birds had halved in the past 40 years and that Europe's nature is in bad health. More than 60% of its soils are unhealthy and 81% of its habitats are in poor condition. Green groups criticised changes in the approved text that cut a proposal to restore agricultural ecosystems and added a line to delay implementation of the law until after a formal assessment of Europe's food security. The law had previously been rejected by the European Parliament's Fisheries and Agriculture Committees. Farmers and fishers said the law demanded too much and did not clarify who would pay. The EU wants fishers to decarbonise the fleet and protect the environment using existing funding, said Daniel Voce de Zerniandi, the managing director of the fishing lobby group Europesh. We want to implement this in a fair manner in the EU and not with an environmental hammer. Shortly before the vote, a handful of Conservative lawmakers said they would break with their party line in favour of an amended version of the law. Fruit and vegetable growers in Scotland have been given assurance on support over the next 2 years to help improve the quality, market value and sustainability of their produce. The Scottish Government has allocated up to £6 million over the next 2 years to extend the Fruit and Vegetable Aid Scheme. The EU Fruit and Vegetables Aid Scheme enables officially recognised producer organisations, or POs, formed on the initiative of a group of growers to receive financial assistance to help increase their competitiveness in the supply chain. The Scottish Borders Produce, East of Scotland growers and Angus growers will all receive a share of the multi-year funding, designed to help increase their competitiveness in the supply chain. The scheme The scheme enables producers to work together using investment and facilities to upscale and gain access to the most profitable markets, which might have previously only been available for the larger, more established producers. That means smaller growers particularly benefit from this support. Rural Affairs Secretary Marie Goujon said, "Supporting our local fruit and vegetable growers is crucial for so many reasons. To make fresh, local produce more readily available in local shops, to support jobs in the agricultural sector, and to increase our food security as a nation." I know that the sector continues to deal with a range of significant challenges and is one of those most acutely affected by Brexit, which has caused unnecessary and unhelpful seasonal labour shortages. Most recently, water scarcity has created problems too in some areas, while every part of farming is still having to meet increased costs for supply inputs and energy. Continuing this support has arguably never been more important. I hope that by extending the support provided by the Fruit and Vegetables Aid Scheme in its current form, we can provide much needed stability and security to the sector over the next 2 years. Meanwhile, we will continue to work on giving greater certainty on a multi-year funding longer term. Potential changes to the council tax system that could see those in the highest value properties asked to pay more if they can afford to have been published. Excuse me. A joint consultation with COSLA is seeking views on plans to increase the amount paid by people in bands E, F, G and H. This aims to address criticism that the system is unfair because, at present, those in the lower bands pay a higher proportion of the value of their property than those in the higher bands. Around 75% of properties would be unaffected if the proposals, which could be phased in over a period of 3 years, were implemented. The council tax reduction scheme would continue to offer lower bills for those unable to afford their council tax, regardless of what band they are in. Public Finance Minister Tom Arthur said, "We have listened to calls for the council tax system to be made fairer, as presently more of the burden falls on those in the lower bands when considered as a proportion of the value of their property. The changes would only affect around a quarter of properties, and even after they are taken into account, average council tax in Scotland would still be less than anywhere else in the UK. We know that many people are struggling with their finances, and our council tax reduction scheme is there to ensure nobody has to pay a council tax bill they cannot be expected to afford, regardless of what band they are in. I would encourage anyone who has views on these proposals to complete our consultation before it closes on the 20th September 2023 to help us determine if they should be taken forward. The consultation will run for 10 weeks from the 12th of July to the 20th of September 2023. Any changes would come into effect at the start of 2024-2025 financial year. Even with the proposed increases taken into account, the average band E to G charge would still be lower in Scotland than in England. The Scottish Government has reached an initial agreement with local government and the NHS about accountability arrangements for the National Care Service, the NCS. The arrangement aims to establish who will be responsible for people's care once the NCS is established. Overall legal accountability will be shared between Scottish Government, the NHS and local government. Staff will continue to be employed by local authorities and councils will still be responsible for assets like buildings and the delivery of services. New governance arrangements will be introduced to ensure consistently high levels of service across the country while building the flexibility to meet varying communal needs at a local level. The consensus follows the Verity House Agreement on closer cooperation between Scottish Government and local government signed last month. Discussions have also recently begun with trade unions, and 2 of this summer's NCS regional code design events have taken place, with several in-person and 5 digital events still to run. Social Care Minister Mary Todd said, "The Scottish Government has been working closely with local government to find a consensus on the National Care Service Bill Scotland, which will allow us to deliver on the urgent improvements needed to strengthen the delivery of integrated health and social care for people. This partnership between the Scottish Government, local government and the NHS helps establish where responsibility for people's care will sit under the National Care Service. The detail of how this will work at a local level will be developed in the coming months, and we will continue to update Parliament on this work, along with the results of our ongoing co-design events taking place across the country after the summer recess." Well, you'll probably be glad to hear that that is it for this evening. But before I go, I just want to remind you here at Broadcasting Scotland that we do depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. You know that our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please do consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We've set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to help us employ staff and to make more programmes. So, meanwhile, that's good night and thank you for watching.